Hello, I'm Robert Martinez in Albuquerque, and I'm the state historian of New Mexico. And this is New Mexico history in 10 minutes. So, let's imagine this mass of humanity moving north into what is now North America from what is now Mexico. It's 1598, and the Oñate expedition is coming through the desert, along rivers, through mountains, mesas, a very difficult journey. There's humans, there's animals, all the elements that you need to start a colony in what to them was the wilderness. Obviously, there were humans, but there's also animals, horses, cows, pigs, sheep, goats, chickens. They're bringing weapons with them. They have the arquebus, which is like a musket. Not very helpful, actually. You can get one shot off, and then you had to reload, and by that time, an enemy warrior is on top of you, and you're just swinging that pistol, hoping to hit something. They have steel. They're bringing swords and a media luna, amazing weapon. It's a long pole with a metal half-moon blade that's sharp, that's excellent for cutting down animals or humans. They also have elements for agriculture and processing food, millstones, gardening tools. It's quite amazing what they brought for this colonization. But what we know is that by April of 1598, they arrive in what is today the Juarez, El Paso area, or just southeast of there. They set up camp and called that place La Toma, the taking. Very symbolic, because that would become the entranceway to the kingdom and province of New Mexico. So they set camp. They have a feast. The priests celebrate a mass. And one of the captains writes a play based on the old medieval Moros y Cristianos from Spain, the battles between Moors and Christians. And it's important and significant because this was not done merely for entertainment, though it was for entertainment, but it also motivated the colonists. It was a tale of victory, victory over difficult and insurmountable circumstances which they were facing. They still had a heck of a journey ahead of them. They were not quite near where they were supposed to be. So this story will stay with the colony and in New Mexico for centuries to come. So they break camp and they head north. This is important because Oñate has a lot on his mind. It's not just to colonize the Pueblo lands. It's also that he is commissioned with a heavy, heavy burden of locating the coasts of the eastern part of North America, the western part of North America. And there's this idea, is it a legend or a myth? Doesn't matter. The Straits of Anian, this idea that there's a waterway that connects the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans in just north of New Mexico. And the idea and hope is that it's not too far. So, as you can imagine, Oñate wants to get to the Pueblos and get established so he could start exploring. Let's remember, these were explorers extraordinaire. Forget Lewis and Clark. We had under Coronado, men finding the Grand Canyon, at least the first Europeans, Native Americans had seen it for centuries. They had seen all these lands for centuries. But as far as Europeans go, the Spaniards were conquerors, they were exploiters, businessmen, but they were also explorers. And they wanted to map the area as much as they could. So, finally, as the expedition inches its way north, they finally reach the southern Pueblos. And typically, what the Spanish would do was read to the people they were subjugating what was called the Requerimiento. This is a document that dates from the early 1500s, from about 1510 to 1513. And it's a document that when they would arrive at a Native American community to take control of them, one of the Spaniards, probably a soldier or a captain, maybe a priest, would take this document out, a scroll, or maybe a book, and he would read in his finest Castilian, Castellano, a history of the world from the times of Adam and Eve all the way through to the current King of Spain and Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. And then the conquered peoples would be told, and now you are part of that history. You are part of our history, and you are now subjects of that Royal Highness, the King, and Royal Highness, the Pope. Well, the native peoples wouldn't have understood a word of this. They probably were looking confused and befuddled and looking at each other like, what? And after a while, they might start making jokes, yelling profanities in their language at the Spaniards, making gestures that were profane or offensive that the Spaniards didn't understand. The Spaniards would probably look at each other, ¿Qué están haciendo? ¿Por qué están haciendo eso? Why are they doing that? What does it mean? So it's quite interesting to think about that process. As the expedition moved north, you can imagine that the Pueblos had been 2 generations since Coronado. They had heard of Spanish people, so this wasn't totally new. But still, to see such a group of people moving through their communities, it was probably quite astonishing. We know that Oñate took control of every pueblo as he went north, and the pueblos were probably reluctantly or conditionally in agreement. They welcomed the Spaniards. Let's just put it that way. They welcomed the expedition. In a heated battle, the Pueblos probably would have taken the Spanish, regardless of the war materials that the Spaniards had. The Pueblos probably could have got rid of the Spanish pretty quickly. But Oñate moved north. He accepted the obedience of the Pueblo leaders in each community. And finally, when it's all said and done, they ended up in what is today Okeawinge. They dubbed it San Juan eventually, the Spaniards did. But at first, when the Spanish got to Okeawinge, they actually were not very good guests. They moved the Pueblo Indians out of their homes, and they took over their homes. This is typical of how a Spanish military would operate in Europe. When you would take over a community, you would take over the finest buildings, and that would become your home, and whoever happened to be living there, too bad for them. The original community was called San Gabriel del Yunque. And then after that, it was called San Juan de los Caballeros, probably named after Juan de Oñate's patron. That situation wasn't going to last. The colony was in the area adjacent to the Pueblo. You can still visit the area. It's on Pueblo land. So ultimately, the Spanish were going to have to do something to coexist with the Pueblos if they were going to remain as a ruling minority. So this is what happens. The Spaniards move out of the Pueblo. They live adjacent in their own little community I just mentioned. And for about, let's see, 1598 to 1608, for about 10 years, that's their base of operation. It's going to be a very shaky situation for the Pueblos, who are having to accommodate these newcomers, and for the Spanish, who are not firmly established in a place where they're surrounded by people who are tolerating the Spanish, but they're not necessarily accepting them as permanent amigos in the area. So we're going to see what happens in this period. You have Pueblo people, and then you have Spanish and Native Americans and Africans in the areas, all interacting on a friendly level, but probably also on a very suspicious level. So this is the auspicious beginnings of the Spanish colony of New Mexico. I'll see you next time. Adios. Goodbye.